Hi, I'm John Green, and this is Crash Course US History. And today, I'm going to talk about the politics and power of America through its colonization and how it made America the great nation it is today. Stan, roll the Libertage! Mr. Green, politics and power? We can't talk about politics and power without talking about the Kardashians. Oh, me from the past. We'll come to learn that the politics and power of America was much more diverse than just a family of countless celebrities, but Badonkodon's so big they have their own gravity. So the beginning of the colonization of Europe. Many Europeans fought over control of the land. In the early years, Spain proved that it was possible to colonize in the Americas. The Spaniards dominated native peoples using the encomienda system. They gave Indians to certain colonists in return for a promise to try to Christianize them. Other countries, impressed with the richest reaped in the colonies, soon followed the Spaniards in colonizing. This led to wars between the European countries for land, and their colonists had to be involved in these wars. The French and Indian War between 1754 and 1763 was a significant fighting over land between France and Great Britain, which many historians have called the 7 Years' War. After all, the Treaty of Paris ended the French and Indian War and gave control of all French land in North America to England. Later, the Stamp Act and the Sugar Act were levied by the British on Americans to help pay for the French and Indian War. Many colonists were upset by the heavy tax imposed upon them. Opposing interpretations of the Constitution has caused arguments in throughout American history, all the way back to Jefferson and Hamilton. Democrat and Republican Thomas Jefferson expected a strict interpretation of the Constitution. Strict constructionists believed that the Constitution should be interpreted exactly as it was written, and the government should not have a lot of power. In other words, the government needed to be limited by the text of the Constitution. On the other hand, Federalist Alexander Hamilton supported a loose interpretation of the Constitution. Loose constructionists believed that the more lenient reading of the Constitution was necessary because they could do it through the Elastic Clause. When Hamilton wanted to create a national bank, the Bank of the U.S., Jefferson strongly opposed it. He said too much power and a monopoly on banking was created. It favored the rich and made the states dependent on the government. It is unconstitutional. Interesting fact, Jefferson actually contradicted himself when he made the Louisiana Purchase in 1803 through using the Elastic Clause. And also, because Jefferson needed to contradict so many of his beliefs during his presidency, he left out being U.S. president on his gravestone. Now let's go to the top moment. Jefferson essentially doubled the size of the United States through the Louisiana Purchase. The rebellion in Haiti prompted Napoleon to want to sell the Louisiana Territory because he needed money for the war in Europe, and the rebellion made him dislike colonies. New Orleans was a strategic area which Jefferson wanted because American farmers shipped their goods through the city. Napoleon offered the entire Louisiana Territory, and Jefferson agreed to the deal, paying $15 million for the Louisiana Territory, and this $15 million would be worth $250 million today. Jefferson got a good deal, considering that an aircraft carrier now costs $4.5 billion. Oh, it's time for the mystery document? Stan, can we shoot that again? That was way less cool than I thought it'd be.
No, we're not filming that again.
Fine! Anyways, the rules are simple. I read the mystery document, and I guess the author and the title of the document. If I'm wrong, I get shot by the sharp pen here. Now let's begin. One of the expedients of party to acquire influence within particular districts is to misrepresent the opinions and aims of other districts. You cannot shield yourself too much against the jealousies and heartburnings which spring from these misrepresentations. They tend to render alien to each other those who ought to be bound together by fraternal affection. All obstructions to the execution of the laws, all combinations and associations, under whatever plausible character with the real design to direct, control, counteract, or awe the regular deliberation and action of the constituted authorities are destructive of this fundamental principle and of fatal tendency. Stan, I know this one. It's the Gettysburg Address by my dear friend here, President Obama. What? It's not? The farewell speech by President Washington? Now, in the beginning, political parties started because people with different political views could not agree on what they wanted from the new government. Federalists like Hamilton believed that America should be a government ruled by the wealthy upper class, with an economy based on capitalistic ideals. Republicans, like Thomas Jefferson, believe in an agrarian economy. The economy man making most of the decisions. This led to a split between the political beliefs of Americans and people such as George Washington, who feared that this was eventually going to lead to a division of the new nation. This proves to be the case, as we currently have the Democrats and Republicans, who seem to only get along when Obama doesn't say anything, or Congress doesn't have any acts to pass. Political parties such as the Democratic and Republican parties developed as the political interests of people changed. Major topics such as the abolition of slavery led to the creation of new political parties with new goals. Okay, so when Franklin D. Roosevelt became the president in 1933, he passed many New Deal programs during the first 100 days to help Americans get out of the Great Depression. 30 years later, President Johnson passed his version of the Democratic Reform Program, the Great Society. The New Deal and the Great Society were both very similar concepts. They both shaped the way Americans viewed their government. The government expanded its intervention with social, political, and economic affairs. The alphabetic agencies were created to help struggling Americans. These included the CCC, FWA, and the NRA. The government took care of the once individualistic families with Social Security and Medicaid. So speaking of health insurance, Stan, how come I'm not getting any?
Isn't $10 an hour already good enough?
Stan! No, the History Channel pays more than this.
So civil rights and liberties were able to change U.S. politics in the same way that U.S. effort tried to spread its ideas like democracy and freedom. After World War II, many European countries were falling into communist power. Romania, Poland, and Hungary all fell to communist rule in 1947, and Czechoslovakia in 1948. The Cold War resulted from conflicts between the U.S. and the USSR, and it's almost starting World War III. The major cause of such conflicts is the U.S.'s fear of communism spreading all over the world by USSR. The fear of communism in the U.S. led to McCarthyism, the Second Red Scare. The U.S. introduced containment in response to expanding of communism, encouraged by the USSR. So the goals was to 1. Stop communism from spreading, 2. Reveal the lie behind the Soviet Union, and 3. Lead deconstruction in the USSR. In response to containment, Truman passed the Truman Doctrine to support democracy over communism. It's a foundation for military buildup, which also became a feature of the Cold War. So because of the policy of containment, U.S. joined the Korean War when it saw the chance of communist power expanding into Asia after the fall of China. This turned the blow to the Mao parts of America. General Douglas MacArthur was able to push the North Korean forces back across the 38th parallel to near the Yalu River, which is the boundary between China and Korea. This caused China to send volunteers on November 1st, 1950 to join North Korea and push South Korea back to the 38th parallel. No gain of land on both sides at the end of the war. So the Vietnam War was another war caused by containment. North Vietnam Communist leader Ho Chi Minh wanted to fight for Vietnam's independence from French suppression. Even though he was fighting for independence, the U.S. had to see him as a threat to other democracy countries around it. The U.S. had about 48,000 casualties at the end, and North Vietnam eventually won, and it united Vietnam as a communist nation. Many Vietnam vets were accused as baby killers when they came back from the war.
Now, despite different wars and different reform movements in different time periods, these all changed American society. People often refer to the 1830 and 1840 reforms of the Jacksonian era, which witnessed the first major effort to refine democracy, as the first era of reform. 1830 began with Jackson's victory of the election of 1830. He started a spoils system, in which he believed that every citizen has an equal right to hold public office. Jackson dismissed hundreds of federal employees and replaced them with his own appointees. The government split between Jeffersonian and Jacksonian democracy. The major difference was between government for the people versus government of the people. At the same time, the Whig Party, a third party, eventually coalesced into a strong anti-Jackson party with a general nationalistic outlook. The Civil Rights Movement in 1956 through 1968 eliminated discrimination and gave African Americans the right to vote. The Brown versus Board of Education case stopped the separate but equal doctrine, the Jim Crow law, and allowed integration in schools in the South. The first integrated high school was Little Rock High School. Many Northerners took the Freedom Ride to the South to protest segregation on buses. Civil rights movement leaders such as Malcolm X, the more violent leader, and Martin Luther King, the one who believed in peaceful protests, gave out speeches to advocate the reform. After the 14th Amendment forbade the states to restrict the basic rights of citizens of other persons, and the 15th Amendment granted African American men the right to vote. Liberalism and conservatism became prominent during the 1980s. Conservatism resulted in a shift from Democratic to Republican leadership in the South. The Republicans chose conservative former actor Ronald Reagan as the president. By the 1980s, the public was tired of the New Deal, and Great Society programs costs were ready to slash bills, just as Reagan proposed. Economic policies under Reagan's administration were called Reaganomics. He passed the Economic Recovery Tax Act in 1981, which boosted the economy by decreasing the unemployment rate. The goal was to reduce the size of the federal government and stimulate economic growth.
So the fight for civil rights since 1900s, especially the civil rights movement that started in 1954, gave African Americans equal rights they should have deserved 100 years ago as white Americans. Prior to that, although there were some African Americans voting, the Jim Crow laws passed in 1877 made it hard for those who lived in the South to really practice their right to vote. Ever since Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation in 1862, many African Americans voted for Republican candidates. They did not vote for Democrats because most Democrats were Southerners who opposed the outlaw of slavery. However, the ratio of African Americans who voted for Democrats and Republicans started to change. In the election of 1936, FDR got 71% of the African American vote, and the similar situation happened in the next two elections. Truman received about 77% of African American vote in 1948 due to his earlier orders to desegregating armed services. The Voting Rights Act of 1965 and the Civil Rights Act of 1968 passed by LBJ also made more African Americans to vote for Democratic candidates. More African Americans identify themselves as Democrats than Republicans. Thanks for watching, and I can get a 5 on that AP exam.
Well, I couldn't get that job in the History Channel, so... Crash Course is originally produced by Stan Muller. This Crash Course is written by Mrs. Arnold's APUSH Period 2, Table 5, and written by Cynthia Q and Sarah Liu. Balboa was portrayed and created by Crash Course. John Green was portrayed by Brian Kwong. Abraham Lee as John Blue, and film ending credits to Sarah Liu. A special thanks to Mrs. Arnold. Thanks for watching. As we say in my hometown, don't forget to be awesome.